We all good? All right. Okay, just to bring us up to speed, here's where we are in the process. Tonight, August 1st, we're going to be talking about miscellaneous funds, enterprise funds. Next step in the process is August 22nd, where we set our stormwater rates. We have to have those set by the middle of September. September 12th is our first reading for the millage rate, budget, and capital improvements program. On September 26th is the final adoption and public hearing for the same. Tonight we're going to go over a couple funds. Community Redevelopment Agency, although we did touch on this with the general fund budget, I'll just go back over that very briefly. Talk about the Stormwater Environmental Utility Fund, Solid Waste Fund. We talked about, as far as the projects with the Parks, Mobility, and Road Impact Fee Fund, so I'll just touch on those briefly again tonight. Go into the Water and Sewer Fund, and then wrap it up. So we're going to start with the CRA. And like I said, we went over this in pretty much good detail in the general fund presentation, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight. I think the most important part of this graphic, which is the same one you saw during the general fund, is that we're going to continue to repay the advances right down here to the general fund advanced to the CRA. In this fiscal year, we repay $800,000 to the general fund and $800,000 to the road impact fee fund that the CRA still owed, and $1.1 million to the general fund. That's for the acquisition of the right-of-way for Independence Lane. Next fiscal year, we're looking at $1.2 million that will stay in the CRA for North Independence Lane construction and repayment of the remainder of the road impact, that what the city owes, the CRA owes the general fund to the road impact fee, the $264,000, which is also earmarked for North Independence Lane. This is the graphic showing the evaluation history. The blue line at the bottom is the $90,000 mark. That was the valuation of all the property within the CRA in 2004 when the CRA was adopted. The valuation projected for this year is, that was $90 million. Valuation this year is $500 million, so we've seen a pretty steep incline there. In terms of actual dollars, we're projecting almost 13% increase over the FY22 levels. Then after that, we're projecting a more moderate growth level of about 2.5% a year. Any questions on CRA? If not, we'll just jump right into the Stormwater Environmental Utility Fund. This is our budget summary. So based upon the direction we received last year from the City Council, we have built in a 3% multiplier for the Stormwater Fund. We discussed that during the last budget process, and we're going to be increasing it 3% a year, and you'll see why in a second because of what was happening in some of the out years. By ordinance, the maximum ERU for the Stormwater Fund is $16.03. That's the total number of ERUs in the city divided by the total stormwater budget. So that's the maximum. We can't charge more than we're actually budgeting. Proposed ERU for next year is $10.40 per ERU. We're projecting a transfer of almost $600,000 from fund balance to fund the budget. But I'll get into that in a second when we talk about projects. We currently have a lot of moving parts within the Stormwater Fund and the capital budget, so I want to go over that with you in some detail so you have a good idea where we're at. We're also recommending one full-time position. This is our 5-year budget summary. You'll see that our operating expenditures, and so let's see if I can point those out to you. Operating expenditures have dropped just a little bit. We had a big stormwater lining project going on in Winfield last year, so we're going to be continuing that next year, just not to the extent that we had this year. What I want to point out here, which we'll get into in just a second, is that even with the 3% increase, looking at our starting balances here in 2026, we're showing a deficit going into 2027, but I'll get to that in a second when we talk about capital. You can also see from the note here at the bottom, there is an unreimbursed administrative allocation this year of, that's actually $182,000. It says 172 there, but that's a input number, it's not a calculated number. There's a $182,000 difference there. We discussed this in some detail last year. The City Council by policy has limited the administrative allocation back to the general fund to $90,000 from this fund. The reason for that was that when the fund was just beginning, the city wanted more money going into the fund, more into maintenance, more into projects, so that's been capped at $90,000. So there is that $182,000 difference there. As far as expenditures go, 68% of the budget is operational, 32% is capital, and as I mentioned, we are recommending one position. I think as most of you know, the department has historically been dependent on consulting engineers for design inspection services on our larger CIP projects. And due to changes in job assignments, consulting engineers are doing a little bit more of our development review. This position would focus on engineering reviews to reduce the need for those outside consultants, along with more of a focus on supporting the stormwater division and the implementation of the Stormwater Lakes Management Plan. The position would develop plans, some design work, some specs for projects that will be under construction based upon staff and resident-generated concerns. We currently farm out all of our design work, and we believe we can be far more efficient and responsive if that's brought in-house. We have a lot of projects that our field staff will go out and see that there's a little areas where there's ponding, puddling, where the roads aren't draining efficiently. We get a lot of resident input on that too, where the issues are on their streets. And right now, we would have one of our design engineers go out there, one of our consultants go out there and work with our field staff to put a design together to fix those problems, when we can really do that a lot more responsibly in-house. So we think that it'd be a valuable position added to the staff out of Public Works. As far as our expenditures, our operating expenditures are on the left here. Maintenance repairs are our biggest chunk of operating budget, which is 22%. Next, sort of going down the list, we have our engineering design, and that's with our outside consultants and professional services, as well as Amy on the water quality side. We have our invasive treatment at 11% for our aquatic weed treatment. Administrative charge is at 10%, and we always do our lab testing, our monthly testing for water quality, and we also have our landfill costs, as you're going down the list a little bit there, as our field crews are out cleaning our systems, taking the Vector out, cleaning out the CDS units and the baffle boxes. They then take that out to dry at the Public Works yard, and once it's dried, we have to dispose of it. So there are landfill costs also associated with the stormwater fund. Now, as I alluded to earlier with the deficit we're looking at and potential deficit we're looking at in 26, I wanted to go over the capital piece of the equation in some detail to know how things are shaking out, how things are moving around on the capital side, because things aren't as bad as they would appear to be. Next fiscal year and in fiscal year 24, we're projected to have our Greenwood Gardens project come online. You see the $500,000 here. That's our FY23 number. There's also a $500,000 projected in fiscal year 24. We are doing the we're doing the feasibility study right now for that. We're just wrapping that up, and the preliminary indications on the feasibility study are there's some real challenges out there in Greenwood Gardens, and the solution that we're looking at probably won't be implementable out there for a number of reasons. So We're going to need to take a step back from that and reevaluate what's going on out there to see if there's a different or better solution, but that certainly won't be happening this year, so that's going to free up that $500,000 and will likely free up a portion of the $500,000 that's budgeted in FY24. So you're looking at $1 million there that we're going to be needing to look at a different solution in Greenwood Gardens than a more straightforward treatment pond solution. Additionally, in the box below that, those are our projects that are budgeted this fiscal year. And in the previous fiscal year, we have in FY21, we've carried forward the Thistle Goldwater design. I think some of you know that we started initial design on that, determined that the initial design was not feasible, was not constructible, so we had to take a step back and go through a redesign process. We have those 90% plans in-house right now that are going under review. So if that project isn't out to bid this year, we'll carry that money forward and put that out to bid and carry that into next year. The more important project here is the Elvin Lake Gem project that we've budgeted $600,000 for this year. That would be sort of a public-private partnership working on the south end of the city. For most of you will remember when we did the Monroe Avenue Ditch project, one of the things we discovered is that the pipe that comes out of Peacock Ford is in very bad condition. And so we were trying to work with the developer of Ravidage to reroute that drainage in a right-of-way and get it into a new pipe before it would discharge into Lake Gem. Those discussions have been ongoing, but they don't seem to be making much progress. So instead of continuing to budget for something that is a public-private partnership, sort of similarly that we were doing with when I first came on board here with Glenn Jaffe over here on Horatio, we put $300,000 in each budget in case he did something on his property that we could team up with him on. But that was just taking money out of the budget for no good reason. So with that one, we decided to step back also and say if Glenn and his partners had a project come forward that could assist with the stormwater there, we would talk about partnering with them at that time and then allocate funds that were necessary if that partnership made sense. What we're recommending this year is to do the same thing on the south end of the city. If the developer of Ravidage puts a project together that is working in the Elvin right-of-way and we can partner with him to relocate that pipe, then we will. But we deal with that when it came up versus speculating that it is coming up. So between the $500,000 that we put in the budget next year for Greenwood Gardens and in FY24, and that's $600,000 for the Elvin Lake Gem project, we have $1.6 million that is sort of up in the air right now. That's why back to the original slide that had the 5-year plan showed that we go into a deficit. I'm not sure we're in that tough of a situation right now because of the status of the actual projects as we stand at this moment. Just to go over the stormwater CIP, you see the two Greenwood Gardens projects there that I just mentioned. That's $1 million over the next 2 years. And to sort of walk you through what our long-range plan is from a stormwater management standpoint, we've identified our 4 lakes that are most impacted, that have the most challenging water quality issues, which are Lake Minnehaha, Lake Nina, Lake Lily, and Lake Park Lake and Gem Lake. So we have our overall city master plan done. So now what we're doing this year is starting to do the basin plan. So we're going to take a look at the Park Lake, Gem Lake basin to see what's impacting those 2 lakes the worst and what we can do from a project standpoint to improve that. So over the next 4 years, we're going to be doing a basin analysis. The way the process works, you do a basin analysis, a design, and then construction plans for each one. And those are sort of go in order from Park Lake, Gem Lake, to Minnehaha, to Lily, to Nina. The problem we have is that we know we're going to be doing the basin analysis, but we don't know what projects are going to come out of the basin analysis. We've all thought that on, for example, Park and Gem Lake, that when the county gave us Lake Avenue, they gave us that great big piece of property on the north end of Park Lake, which would seem to be ideal for a retention area, which is the most efficient way to treat stormwater. So coming out of those neighborhoods to the north and off Lake Avenue, that would seem to be an ideal place to do a retention pond to treat a large volume of water coming into Lake Jim. But as we move forward, as things become more constrained, there might be different alternatives in terms of, there might not be project oriented, they might be changes in our maintenance schedule or more intense maintenance around those lakes to clean out the debris, the nutrients before they enter the lake. But since we don't know what they are, the numbers that you see in the next 5-year CIP are sort of placeholders that we know we're going to be doing something, but we don't know what that something is right now. So as far as what we do this year with the fee, I just did a little graphic here to show what the impacts are. Right now, if you take a look at this, this shows our trend over the years where our stormwater fee has gone. We did that dip right here back in 2018. We dropped it and then kept it the same. We've been at 960. We were at 960 for 3 years, then we're slowly bringing it up, and this shows the 3% increase over the years to what we're proposing this year at 1040. Just to give you an idea of what that means is $1 of every ERU equals $11,500 in real dollars. So annually that equates to $38,474. So at the proposed ERU of 1040, we'd be looking at $1.4 million coming into the stormwater fund. If you would raise that a dollar, that dollar that we know, you'd have about $1.6 million coming into the stormwater fund. So, although the 5-year projection isn't showing it fully funded, I think we're good for this year until we at least get that first basin plan under our belt, see what we're going to be doing at Park Lake, Gem Lake, and then start the first project under our belt, and then start looking at the other lakes to give us an idea what the scale of magnitude is there before we would look at increasing it beyond 3%. At least that would be staff's recommendation. So, any questions on the stormwater fund? Let's jump into...
yeah, I'm sorry, I was taking a note.
No problem. I would have been disappointed if you didn't have the question.
Yeah, right? So, you know, we're budgeting it as the prices of today, but, you know, I was looking on some of the, when you broke it up into what, you know, the percentage that every dollar goes into, I was looking at lab testing, contracted sweeping, gas, oil. I mean, these are all things that, you know, a year ago we would have been like, all right, it's going to stay steady and be here and here. So, was that thought into this cost, or are you basing that on today's?
No, those were built in. We have the gas escalator index in there. We'll talk a little bit about it in the
And that goes for the contracted services and also maybe what testing would be?
Yes.
Because I know right now we got a pretty good price on testing.
Yes, we have an excellent price on
yes,
testing right now.
Yes, so I'm very happy with that.
Yep. So yeah, and that's locked in for 3 years, I believe.
Okay.
So yeah, the sort of the wild cards that we're going to talk about in a second on the solid waste fund, or what our solid waste costs going to be as we move forward. That's a little bit up in the air, but regardless of where they go, we're not going to be able to. It's not going to be a budget buster for next fiscal year. Once we have a better feel for where those are at, where the projects are, it's likely that we're going to have to make some adjustments to the stormwater fee. It's just that I would have a hard time recommending raising the stormwater fee on what might happen, what might come out of the basin analysis, what projects might come out of those basin studies, versus having something tangible to say, here's a project, it costs $1.4 million, this is where it fits into the FY 23-24 budget, which yields this effect 5 years out, so we need to make adjustments so we can cover the projects 5 years out. That first study should give us a pretty good idea of where we're going to be going in the future and how to address those.
And when was it that you had on there that we're in the hole? Like
2026.
2026.
Based upon our current capital plan, but that, like I said, that includes the Greenwood Gardens and the Elvin, and that's $1.6 million that we have sitting out there. So in 2026, it showed us about $800,000 in the hole. So depending on what happens with those projects, that would put us, $500 to $1 million in the black in 2026. But still, looking at 2027, looking to tap into fund balance. So, and that's one of those things that when you talk about the stormwater fund balance is different than our general fund balance or our utility fund balance, because the stormwater fund balance is what pays for projects. We have all of our operational costs that come out of the fee, and what's left over goes into fund balance. That fund balance pays for projects. So it's not a savings account per se, it's a reserve account to pay for projects. And so you build it up until you have enough money to pay for the projects you have, then you draw it down and you build it back up to pay for projects, then you draw it back down. There's no legal requirement for us to have any coverage in that fund balance account.
Okay, so it could be zero, it could be
0,
2 million.
it could be $3 million.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's good news, but bad news, I think, with Greenwood Gardens.
Yeah.
But by the time we do it, that million that we have for it, it's going to go up in cost too. Probably.
Yeah, and it just depends on what we do at Greenwood. The challenge we have with our older neighborhoods like that, or they were built prior to there being any stormwater management requirements through the St. Johns River Water Management District. So they were just doing their best to move water away from the houses and make it go away versus finding places to...
Oh, I live it, I know.
Yeah, I think a lot of us do.
Yeah.
So that becomes a challenge since no provision was made for treatment, and the provisions they made for conveyance are long gone now, and a lot of times the plans aren't even there, so we can come back and reconstruct what originally was there to move the water. That makes the older neighborhoods a real challenge, because as you know, Greenwood Gardens was built with the roadside swales, which they're great when they're there until people fill them in, and then when they fill them in, they flood the road.
Any way to do water gardens? I know this isn't about budget, but is there any way to do water gardens in that area?
You'd have to find the space to do it. A more likely solution, and this is just me speculating based upon what I've seen with the initial analysis and knowing what I know about stormwater, is you'd probably end up having to go underground with something. And you're not, you're getting expensive there, and then you're looking at the bang for the buck there too, as far
kind of
as
like we did at the parking lot by.
Yeah. So it's not the greatest solution. It's an expensive solution, and then you have to sort of balance that with the scale of the problem versus the cost of the solution. So we have road flooding out there that we've been trying to deal with, some minor yard flooding, and we had some complaints of some structure flooding, but you just have to do the cost benefit then to see if it's worth it when the fact that the road does drain, it ends up in the yards, it does percolate. So, but we'd have to go into that analysis to see where that leads us. So again, that's just me speculating on what I know right now, but that would be a solution to part of the problem there, because the problem runs along Robin Hood and actually runs most everywhere.
Yeah, that road's pretty flat.
And that you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Everything is so flat out there that there's no place to push the water to make it go, and that's the real challenge we're running into, is that you don't have any topographic drop across the property, so
Right.
it's a real challenge out there.
And my last thing, I'm sorry, my last one is with Ravidage and relocating that pipe. That's always been a big concern of mine, because I know it's going in there from, all those cars being repaired and driving around and whatever they do, leak or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's really based on what the owner of that property does to get the pipe relocated?
No, actually, we have it's our pipe. We have an easement over the pipe. We have a 5-foot easement over that pipe that runs through there. What we would like to do is route the stormwater around there, see if we get some treatment there, and then leave that to the redevelopment of the site to take care of. Because I think we all believe that sooner or later that site will redevelop.
Right.
And when it does, that becomes their issue to take care of. Then they have to treat all the water on the site. They have to figure out how to push it around. That pipe probably gets abandoned in place, and they redo it because of its depth and it's just a corrugated metal pipe that's kind of falling apart under there. So that becomes their issue to deal with and not a city issue to deal with. We'd be taking care of our water off-site, so that would be their responsibility to take care of their water. So we're trying to separate those two things.
And I lied, one more question. Our storm pipes in most areas, are they as dated as the other pipes in town? Are they all like in their 50, 60-year range?
The storm pipes that are in, they coincide with whenever the development went in. So whatever the age of the development is, the age of the storm pipes are. Fortunately, storm pipes will last longer if they're installed correctly. They will last longer than your water and sewer lines. So and they're much easier to repair too because you're not
with the liner, the inflatable liner.
Yeah, you can line them, burst them, things like that to restore them in place versus digging them up and fixing them. So and that's what we're doing out in Winfield.
I know you said the 1040, the recommended PRU, is not fully funded, and I understand, what you're saying about why the city doesn't believe that affects the recommendation of the city. The 1140 there, is that what the price would be fully funded, or what's?
No, that's just an example. Yeah, I didn't run the numbers to fully fund. If you're interested in that, I could certainly do that. We went through that exercise last year to see what it would take, and that's where we ended up with let's take an incremental approach until we have projects that we can actually put a dollar sign to, and then make, if we need to make an additional increase, then let's do it at the time. But the philosophy was let's keep it going up, let's keep it moving up, because we know we're going to need extra money. But so hopefully that will soften the blow if we have to take a larger jump, or maybe it'll cover costs depending on what the projects are.
But I think I saw that the maximum, understanding that the maximum can't exceed the budgeted amount, that the maximum was like
1640.
16 something.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of the analysis here, though, was that one, this is not tax deductible, so this is a fee. Am I right on this,
Mm-hmm.
Mark?
Yep.
And so that if you had to, whereas in general property taxes are tax deductible, so there isn't this is a different kind of fee to the user than a tax per se. And then also on that front, I know we talked about I think we talked about last year that administrative expense,
Mm-hmm.
and that whether or not we continue that, whether or not you continue to assess that versus just make that fee part of the general budget, and the benefits of that. And if you started to get to a point where that fund was running thin, you could reallocate potentially the administrative cost. I know we talked.
Yeah, we ended up with let's just
keep it there,
keep the status quo.
Right.
Because if you in order to reimburse the general fund the full administrative costs, you'll be taking that $180,000 out of capital. You wouldn't be taking it out of operating, so you're making your capital situation worse. The alternative would be to raise your fee to cover that administrative cost. You'd be raising it the equivalent of to cover that $180,000, which would be a pretty big jump.
or you drop that reimbursement. You drop the reimbursement of that to the general fund to zero.
Yeah, if you drop it to zero, then it's $90,000 back to the
right. So
back to the fund.
in a year where you were starting to, or in years outlook where let's say some of these projects started to come online,
Mm-hmm.
and you envisioned that, hey, in so many years we're down, you could potentially play with that number and bring it down
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to make it, instead of having to jump this fee in any given year, you
Yeah.
can take care of it.
Yeah, you have that, you have at least that $90,000 wiggle room.
Which compounds over.
Yep. Anything else?
I'm just kind of noticing 2017 was 1039 and this year is 1040. Just tell you
Yeah.
where we changed in
Yeah, we were just talking about that today in the office.
6 years.
Yep. Yep. Okay, moving on to our solid waste fund then. This is a lot of numbers up here, so I'll try to go over the key points here. Just to get to a bottom line, in our solid waste fund, the total impact to our net position is a decrease of $100,000. Across the top, you can see that revenues are pretty much stable across the top. There you see the $100,000 net income loss. We have some expenditures that are increasing this year due to CPI. I'll get to those in a second. But all in all, we have a pretty strong fund balance here in solid waste fund, so I don't have a lot of concerns this fiscal year on solid waste. Our largest expenditure in the solid waste fund is contractual services, which accounts for 73% of the fund. These include charges for hauling, which is Waste Pro, and the disposal fees from Seminole County and now Orange County, since our commercial waste is being diverted to Orange County. In this fiscal year, we got a notice from Seminole County after years of having no increases that they're increasing their tipping fees by 4.5%, as the note says there. It came very late in the year. There are some challenges that seem to be occurring up in Seminole County, certainly from a communication standpoint, certainly from a staffing standpoint. They've had turnover at the top of their environmental services division. We're hoping that has stabilized and we can engage them in conversations regarding our interlocal agreement, where we're going to be going with that over the next few months. We do have a 4% increase in residential and commercial solid waste, yard waste, and recycling collection services. That's the Waste Pro number, which I'll go over in a second. That's the table at the bottom. Then there's a 6% increase in the administrative reimbursement to the general fund. Now, if you can see this table on the bottom, this is historically how the formula worked for Waste Pro within their contract. And I put the last 3 years there to see how much change we've seen this year. So we have our CPI, our Consumer Price Index. Waste Pro gets to capture 90% of that as far as an increased fee goes. And then you have your fuel index, which Waste Pro gets to capture 10% of that. So you can see when you do the math across these lines, in 2021 we had a very nominal increase that we were able to absorb within the fund, so we didn't have to pass that on to customers. As a matter of fact, we have not, residential customers have not seen an increase in their solid waste fees for 11 years, going on 12 right now. So in 2022, you see the same sort of trend where you actually had significant negative growth in the fuel index, and so again, virtually no increase from Waste Pro. That all changed in 23, where we're looking at 8.4% in the Consumer Price Index. That 90% of that they can capture is 7.5%. We all know what's gone on with the price of fuel. It's gone up 30%. They get to capture 3% of that 10% number. So all in all, they're looking at 10% increases. Fortunately for us, with the structure of their contract, they're only allowed to increase fees to us 4%. So no matter what that number says, they can only increase to 4% for us. So that's what we're looking at this year. So the structure of that contract has certainly helped us this year. If that clause wasn't in there, we'd be looking at a significant increase in our solid waste costs. So we're not looking at making any changes this year. I think what we need to be cognizant of is Seminole County, what they want to do with our interlocal agreement. They have sort of indicated they want to renegotiate it, but not really. When I received the letter allowing us to divert commercial flows our commercial waste stream to Orange County. They said they'd allow us to do it while they're reevaluating our interlocal agreement. So they're aware that we do have an interlocal agreement that's different than the agreements they have with their haulers. The fact that we are diverting our commercial waste stream to Orange County is more expensive, so we're going to monitor that over the next few months, which may necessitate an increase on our commercial side because it is more expensive to haul to Orange County. It's more efficient for Waste Pro. It keeps that commercial waste stream flowing, so we don't see that backing up, which would be a real problem, but it is more expensive, so we're going to be monitoring that over the next few months, and we may be coming back with you for an increase on the commercial side. But we're going to take a look at that.
How far do they have to go in Orange County? A lot farther than going down to.
It's a slightly shorter trip. The benefit of Orange County is the hours are much longer, and the facility is much larger, so the waits are shorter. So you can start earlier, run later, so it makes it more efficient. Gives them much more flexibility.
But it's a little more expensive?
Yeah, a little more expensive.
You said we're tapped out at 4%.
Yeah.
On the terms of our contract, but do they have the ability to terminate our contract, or to not renew, I should say?
We are in the first, we just renewed the contract for 3 years, and then we have the option for 3 after that,
So we're in the middle,
yeah.
or beginning of
the first 3 years, yeah. Yep.
So she led into my question about contracts. So we just renewed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with Waste Pro.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I know we were a little scared what they were going to do. I mean, was it as bad as expected or better than expected?
The contract?
Yeah.
Same contract.
The same as before?
Yeah.
Nothing changed?
Nothing changed.
Well, that's good. That's good then.
Yeah,
Better
it was a shrewd move. It was
Yeah.
a well-timed move. So we're sitting in pretty good shape. Obviously, there have been problems. I mean, you know, I'm not going to say there haven't been problems, but those problems aren't related to the contract. Those problems are related to the labor market. They seem to be, I say that, stabilizing, but we'll see how that goes. I mean, the same problem that Seminole County's having with their drivers, so it's not a problem unique to Waste Pro. All right, jumping into miscellaneous funds. Again, we talked about a lot of this during the general fund workshop, so I'm just going to go over this real briefly as sort of a reminder. Parks Trust Fund, only revenue source is park impact fees, and that's only by new residential development. So we pretty much spent down the Parks Trust Fund last year with Fort Maitland. We used Parks Trust Fund money for that, which is going to be completed here in the next several weeks. And we did the improvements to Hill Rec, putting playground out there, drinking fountains, sidewalks. So that left us with just a little bit of money left in the Parks Trust Fund money, which we have budgeted to do the initial evaluation and preliminary design for an expansion of the building at the community park.
That impact fee for 24 on the Parks Trust Fund, is that projection of Rabadage?
Yeah, that's new development just coming online. So it's sort of a general trend for what we see coming in. The bottom line is that it will be what it will be. That comes in with the building permits. So the number could be, if we get lucky, $1 million. If we get unlucky, it'll be 0. So you can only spend that as you get it.
You're just kind of rubbing the crystal ball, see what comes up.
Yeah. Road impact fee, this really isn't an active fund anymore since there's no longer money coming into it from outside. However, the CRA does owe it that $264,000 that I mentioned when we talked about the CRA's budget. We're recommending using that for North Independence Lane. One thing I want to point out to you also, and I think we talked about this during the general fund, if not, we did budget some money for the feasibility analysis for turn lanes and mast arms at Thistle and Horatio and Seneca, the 2 lights there. If that's going to be done this quarter, fourth quarter of 22, If that turns out not to be feasible, then that $75,000 just rolls in, and we end up using it for North Independence Lane. So that's a pretty straightforward formula. And as was mentioned last year, those two intersections are a real challenge. There's drainage conflicts there. The intersections are very tight to be able to put mast arms and turn signals in, because the mast arm bases are 8 feet wide. So you would be likely taking people's private property to make that happen, if it can even happen. I think it was mentioned last year also that when these projects came up 15 years ago, when we were doing the neighborhood programs, there wasn't a lot of design put into them. It's mostly public input. This is what we'd like to see happen in our neighborhood. These are the kind of ideas we'd like to have. And so they kick the can down the road from a design perspective. So we're doing that this year to see if that's even possible. Mobility fees. This funding comes from the mobility fees paid by new development to fund the city's mobility strategies. There's not a lot of money in this fund right now, but it can be used for any form of mobility. Trails, bike trails, sidewalks, anything that moves people around. It's not like the road impact fee money. It was used specifically to improve roads and improve capacity in roads. This year, we're looking at redesign of Covewood Sandsper intersection to make it more pedestrian friendly. And we're looking at funding the bike facilities on Keller Road as we reconstruct Keller Road. We can extend the bike paths down there. The mobility fund would be eligible to pay for those.
So if Parks and Rec wanted to, they have their bike plan for that west side, there's really no biking path right now. They could ask the city to grab into this fund to pay for those.
Yep.
And that would have to be in the Parks and Recs fund.
No, fortunately for that next section, we got a pretty large grant from the state, so that's helping us out with that. So, but yes, that's what mobility funds are designed to do. Okay, now the water and sewer fund. These next two slides, again, a lot of numbers up here, but what we've essentially done is taken what Brian Mance went over with you in that 40-slide presentation and compacted it into one table here. So it sort of all comes together. We've only put 3 years up here, because if I put the 5 years up here, it just becomes too busy. It's busy enough as it is right now. But we do have a 3-year plan. We have our 5-year capital plan. We also have a 10-year long-term plan for water and sewer. The way it works is you have your operating revenues up here, which are the fees that we've been talking about. Then your operating expenditures here, which it takes to operate your water and sewer systems. Then we get down to here into your debt coverage. Since we are taking on debt every year with every project that gets completed, we are taking on additional debt. We have to have that debt coverage. And as you jump to the next page, which is one table in the packet that I gave you, you get into your non-operating expenses, which is again the debt we're taking on, and how that affects your net income or loss. And so down here you see this year we're projecting a $625,000 loss in the water and sewer fund. That's the reason we're talking about raising the fees, because you see we're assuming the fees are implemented, and you see how that decreases over the next 2 years as the fees get implemented to get that net income balanced out. So that's where we are on the fund as a whole. Now, on the personnel side, we are requesting to add some positions. First is the wastewater tech. The logic behind adding a wastewater tech is similar to the logic we talked about in the general fund with adding another road person into our streets division. So right now we have 5 people out in crews, which leaves you with 2 two-person crews, or 1 one-person crew, or a 3-person crew and a 2-person crew, which is not efficient. That's typically not the way you're structured. So if we add a wastewater tech, we can have 3 crews out there, which is most efficient, consisting of a lead and a tech. So that adds to the safety of the folks that are out there. There's always 2 people in a crew at least. It also adds for accountability because you have 2 people working together, so they work as a team. So we'd like to see that just to balance out our crew numbers. We're also requesting a GIS analyst. And this is a function of how any GIS system works. Right now, we continue to invest in our GIS system. We've been doing that for the last several years. We need people to build that system, but we also need people to maintain that system. We've done really well on the build part, but as we continue to do that, we also need to be looking at what we're doing year to year on the maintenance side, because as we're adding water lines, sewer lines, stormwater lines, our roads, we're also replacing stormwater lines, replacing water lines, replacing sewer lines, we're exercising valves, we're maintaining lift stations. This can all be tracked within a GIS system. That's the maintenance side of it. That's the side that if we have, as we track water line breaks, we can create heat maps showing where the concentrations of water line breaks are that can then inform our capital plan on where we need to focus on our water line replacement. So having the lines there is critical, but then knowing what's happening with those lines is equally critical. That's the sensitivity analysis that GIS allows us to do. And we're at that point, we're ready to take that step with an analyst to bring them on so we can add that level of analysis to inform our capital improvements program on where and when to schedule our capital improvements. So that's in there. We're also looking at adding another project manager. With the workload that has been generated with our very aggressive capital improvements program, we need people to manage projects. We currently have our operational staff basically doing double duty on keeping the plants running, keeping the lift stations running, maintaining the lines that are in the ground, dealing with water line breaks, also managing the biggest capital projects that we've ever had in this city. We are in a huge growth mode when it comes to adding and maintaining and replacing our lines. So you need people that are that are definitely focused on that. So this position would allow all of our capital projects to have management support, so our operational staff can focus on the operations, can keep the systems up and running. And we currently spend a lot of money on consultants doing project management for us not that they're not good project managers, but they don't have the eye that someone from the city has on a project as far as the quality of work, being on top of a contractor, making sure the contractors know what the expectations are, not getting too friendly with the contractors, then being that interface between the residents that are out there too, having a face of the city out there. So we are recommending that because our capital project load is, like I said, very aggressive and necessary if we're going to be moving forward. As far as expenditures, this is how all our expenditures break out. Again, contractual services are the largest portion of our budget, and they relate to the cost of primarily wastewater treatment at Iron Bridge and Altamont Springs treatment plant. So we don't treat our own wastewater. We rely on others to do that. So we rely on the city of Altamont and the city of Orlando to do that. That comes with a cost, and that is that contractual services number. We also have to pay the South Seminole North Orange County Wastewater Transmission Authority to get our wastewater from the east side of the city all the way down to Oviedo, the Iron Bridge plant too. So there are some costs there. So the fact that we don't have a plant does push those up a little bit. And everything breaks out pretty much proportionally the way it did last year. As we all know, the city is currently looking at implementing rates from the rate study to ensure that our utility fund remains in compliance with our debt service requirements, our coverages, and can also continue ongoing operational, repair, maintenance, and our capital construction program. So the recommended 9% this year, and these are the numbers that came out of the study. We're looking at potentially $6.44 increase in bill for your average user. Now I sort of wanted to walk through our capital programs on water and sewer to explain the the method that we put into that. This is our water side. So on the water side, we have every year you see in the next 5 years water line replacement. So we've been talking about that for a long time. We have done some of that water line replacement. We're going to step that up a little bit so we can have water line replacements continuing going every year. When you look at the sewer side of it, or the water plant side of it, we have an issue in year 5 out there, or year 4 and 5, with plant 5. So that's what's driving the improvements in years 1, 2, and 3. Water plant 6 is our workhorse water plant. That's the one that's out at the Public Works yard. That's our biggest plant. That's the one that puts most of the water out there. In order for us to take care of the problems of plant 5, we need to make sure that plant 4 and plant 6 are up and running at their peak performance. So we're looking at making improvements to plant 6 first, which could include another ground storage tank out there, certainly a replacement of the high service pumps with some variable speed pumps, make sure our controllers are up to speed, up to date, make sure our well casings are all good, so that's running at peak performance. Then we move to water plant 4, which is our plant out in Domerick at the near the church and the middle school. Do the same thing there without the ground storage tank option because we don't have the space out there. But make sure your high service pumps are where they need to be, your well casings are there, and all your controls are in place. So those 2 plants can be running at peak performance because we have to take plant 5 offline. Plant 5 has reached the end of its useful life. The ground storage tank needs to be replaced. The building needs to be replaced. All the controls need to be replaced. We need to rebuild water treatment plant 5. So while that's going on, we need 4 and 6 running all the time. So that's how the plan works out here, and that's why I said to you, we have a very aggressive capital improvements plan, but it's a necessary capital improvements plan if we're going to continue to deliver the quality services to our residents and our ratepayers on the water side. So that's how that capital plan shakes out. Any questions on that side of it? On the sewer side, not dissimilar to the water side. Obviously, in 2023, we're looking at continuing the Domerick Hills sanitary sewer system to make sure that keeps going. And since we got grant funding for that, instead of doing it in 4, even though we have 4 phases, we're bidding it out as a next phase. It'll be phased over time because you can't tear up an entire neighborhood at one time. Although some of the neighbors right now might argue with that we could tear up an entire neighborhood at one time. We're still going to phase it into smaller bites so we can maintain traffic control out there and get that in one more smooth, continuous process. In 2024, we're looking at lift station number 7 construction, and if you're not familiar with lift station 7, which I can't believe you're not, it's the one that's located in the middle of Maitland Avenue. So in the median, Maitland Avenue at the JCC. So that is an old station. It's in a horrible location. Anytime we have to maintain anything there, we have to shut down the left turn lane into the JCC and the lane of traffic on Maitland Avenue. And that's just for regular maintenance. If anything really bad happens there, then we're shutting down the entire road and having to maintain a lift station that's right there sitting in the middle of the road. So we're looking to relocate that off. We're in negotiations now with the property owner up there to use part of their parking lot to relocate the lift station so it can be outside of a right-of-way. If that doesn't work, then we'd be having to move it within another right-of-way, within the Marion Way right-of-way, but much less traveled, much easier to manage, much easier to divert traffic if something would go wrong with that lift station. We'll also be looking at a design of our lift station 17 force main, and lift station 17, that's me, Dale. The lift station 17 force main. Lift station 17 is right up on Sandspur Road. It takes all the flows from this part of the city, from 1792 west, down Wymore Road, down Kennedy, through Eatonville, up Keller Road, to eventually end up at the Altamont Springs treatment plant. So long force main, so we're going to get that designed and then move into construction in 2025. Depending on the design and the condition of the line, that could be a multi-year project, which don't know. It's such a long line that it's a big project regardless. So we'll be looking at that over a couple of years probably. Then we talked about the North Keller Road gravity sewer, the phase 1 of that, where we need to do the gravity sewer that picks up everything on the north side of the west side and takes it up to Altamont. And then we have SCADA upgrades. SCADA is our communication system that we have with our lift stations, so we need to upgrade that, so that'll be throughout the city. And then in year 5, we will, in a perfect world, based upon our schedule, we'll have all of our major lift stations taken care of. They've all been upgraded from the old can style to a well style lift station, and then we'll start going back and looking at our smaller lift stations that serve neighborhoods, and that's what those are, like lift station 1A, 1C, and 13A. Those are just lift stations that serve neighborhoods that pump to a larger lift station. So that's our plan there. This year we've planned lift station 8, which is over in Lake Sibilia, and 42 up here at the pond behind Publix. The only thing that could slow this down would be the cost of construction. I mean, that's, depending on where those construction costs go, those will drive it, because we have a finite amount of money that we can put into this. So if the bids come in high, then we have to make adjustments in our capital plan. I mean, there's only so much money, and there's only so much borrowing capacity we have also. So that's on the sewer side. Any questions on water and sewer? Home stretch. Next steps, August 22nd, set the stormwater rate. We will be looking at setting the tentative millage rate on September 12th, and then wrapping the whole budget process up at the end of September on the 26th. So with that information, can I answer any questions?
Thank you, Mark. Anybody have any questions?
No, I think, you know what, Claude, I think that GIS and analysts would be something great. I mean, I know you've been around, and it used to be, predating Kim, it was told to us, oh, we have maps of everything, and we did it. And so I know Kim's been working hard to get all these pipes, located and worked out. I mean, I still remember on our road one day we had a leak by Bob Rawa's house, and a big puddle of water came up. They came out there, they're like, didn't even know there was a pipe here. So this will know where every single pipe is, when it leaks, whatever it does.
Valve, yeah, so we can know when we shut off valves what the effect is on the rest of the system.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful system if you design it and use it correctly, and we're certainly on our
And listen, just coming back from a third world country where you can't turn on the water and drink out of a faucet, or you can't flush the toilet or flush your toilet paper. I mean, you're appreciative of this stuff, man. So you come back, you're like, we're doing a great job around here. So yeah, I find all this to be very, very important.
Anybody else?
Then the only question I would have would be for the 22nd, are we good with the 1040? Because if we're good with it, which I recommend that we stick at 1040, the 3% increase, that's how I'll write up that resolution. Just so we don't, because last year we talked about it for about an hour and a half, so I have no problem engaging in the discussion, doing some.
I don't know if we can really make that here, can we?
I'm just looking. I have to put something together.
Yeah, he's probably.
We'll be recommending 1040.
So, but in 2 years out, we're starting to look pretty thin, right? So this is
Probably three years out, based upon the capital plan. Yes.
Okay. And
Based on the reality of the capital plan.
do you foresee a radical adjustment in that time in the next year? I mean, I like the idea of not having, we're going to have other increases, and I like the idea of not having as many increases in the same year as possible. But
Yeah, and that's. I think I know we'll have a much better idea once we get that first basin analysis under our belt to see what the scale of magnitude is and what those costs are going to be. So we could base, once we get Park Lake, Gem Lake under our belt and see what that's going to look like, we could project that out to those other 3 lakes that we have and have a better idea of where we're going to be with that.
I know everyone might know already that I'm a visual learner, so I am going to need for myself to put together sort of like Mayor Lance was saying, like the different increases, you know, and sort of how that all looks for the big picture. But I think overall, my concern is in general with not increasing things until we feel we need to at the last minute. It seems that that puts a bigger stress on the city and on our residents than, and I know that there's an increase, it's a small one, but I see that there, you know, the suggestion, but that's kind of my overall philosophy is, you know, that we don't know, especially with the stormwater, it looks like there's always going to be projects that we could use that money on, so.
Yeah, and the downside is which has been the same thing every year, and the same thing is said every year. If you run out of money, then you wait, because you know next year we're always going to have, if we spend down that fund, we know that the next year we're going to have $1.4 million coming in at this rate. So there will be money coming in every year. It's a recurring revenue source. So if we have to stretch out a project a year or two, then that's the reality of the situation. You either stretch it out over 2 years, or you save for a year or two, and then you do the project. You know, that's just the
But
reality.
to your point, if you had enough money, then you could just finish the
Yeah.
project.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's different philosophies, you know, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Anytime we talk about taxes, which are honestly the good debates to have. Those are the ones I miss in the world. But I think that there's the idea of, you know, knowing, what I hear you saying is like knowing where we're going to spend it and being able to justify to someone, here are the projects that, you know, justify this particular increase. And I understand that. I also think that personally, as a taxpayer, a slight increase every year, I sort of just expect those across the board in almost everything I do or consume, and as opposed to like a 10% all of a sudden, because there is something to spend it on. And so I think that's kind of the two different.
Yeah, and it's all a scale of magnitude too. I mean, the stormwater fund, a 10% increase is a 90-cent a month increase. So
Right, and you know that's how I like to look at, okay, what does that actually mean?
yeah. So it's, you know, so you're not talking big dollars to your individual homeowners or residents.
But it's a big to our city.
But yeah, it makes a big difference to the fund for sure.
So what do you think you'd like to see? What kind of information would, I mean, and I agree with your point, maybe we see something, used to be, I know with Sharon, it would change it all around and everything like that, but, you know, like with stormwater, 1140 to 16, where does that get you? Or
Right, like I said, I think I want to look at, and this is our last budget workshop, yeah? Not our last budget meeting, I know, but our last budget workshop. So I, for myself, shortly, I'm going to look at across the board, you know, what everything big picture looks like. And I'll touch base with Mark about specifics, but I am sensitive to not just bringing it up for the first time the next time and having some sort of like direction.
We batted this around a lot, and part of, I think, what caused the dip down was the dip up, the rise up.
Yeah.
And so instead of rocking back and forth on that pendulum and having the city be a little bit uncertain, that if you jump it 1 year because you get 3 votes that jump it in 1 year, and then the next there's a reaction to dip it, I thought there was a sort of an idea that if you kept it steady, you long-term projected out that the city was in a potentially better place because there was consistency on the planning side, staff knew how to plan, project could be planned, and it wouldn't be so susceptible to ups and downs. Plus there was thought that, by someone who's not here anymore, but that you raise this money, you put it in a fund, the fund doesn't spend the money. What message is that sending if you raise it $1 this year, and you go beyond a percent, you have a 3% increase, then that money sits in a fund and it doesn't get spent. Then does the next council go back and say, well, wait a minute, we raised the money, we didn't spend it, let's lower it.
Yeah.
And then it's harder to bring back up, so. I mean,
I
there
think it
was-
goes with what Lori said, everybody has their view of how it could go, it's like, oh, we have this money and it sits there and we do nothing with it. Or we don't have enough money and we have to stretch it out for tomorrow.
You can always find something to do with it if you act on it, I think is the issue. And yeah, I mean, to your point, I can't control who else is up here with me and how long I'm here and, to degree and all that. But I think I generally wouldn't, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter because no one's talking about lowering it right now. But I'm not sure that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense to me in any circumstance unless, there's extenuating circumstances. I think gradual increases is kind of my point, as opposed to, it's 10% and then we feel the need to boomerang it back. And so I understand that there's a gradual increase proposed, and I promise to pursue a bit of an education in the next week.
Yeah, and let's not lose, on stormwater especially, let's not lose sight of the fact that the biggest bang for your buck anywhere in stormwater is your maintenance. That in your operational fund, not your capital fund. It's the guys that are out in the street with the Vector, pulling stuff out of the systems before it gets to the lake. I mean, that's recognized in our NPDES permit, that we get much more credit for our ongoing maintenance program than we do for capital programs. So it's the guys out there that are working every day to keep the systems clean, to keep them, to make sure that the stuff doesn't get into the lakes. If it doesn't get into the lakes, it doesn't adversely affect the lake. So that's your most effective way to keep your lakes clean. And we have that very well funded right now.
Yeah, I think all these workshops give me a very detailed look at a bunch of different things, and so that's sort of the big picture I'm looking at. Maybe I think it's the millage. I mean, I don't know, but that's what I'm saying I will look at.
And Mark, question, Independence, will that be pricey if we go north? Will that be pricey to hook up? I know we already ran the lines and it goes very slope to the retention pond. Are we looking at a big cost for that in 2-3 years if we get this agreement to go north?
Well, there's going to be a cost to it. I'm not sure. The cost will be what it is when you bid the project out. After we get the right of way, then we start the design process. With the design process comes a
Just
cost
something I wanted to
estimate.
throw out there, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering.
Right. If we did it today, it would be expensive. I mean, everything's expensive. I mean,
Right.
I think I might have mentioned to you at a previous meeting when we were at the Sniffwater Board meeting, we have all the public works folks around there. They said their projects are coming in 40% above what they budgeted for, and they budgeted high. And the projects are still coming in 40% higher than they budgeted. They thought they'd cover it by putting an escalator on it, and they're still coming in 40% above that. So it's an odd contracting world out there right now. There's no guarantees.
Well, I don't hear any straining objection to 1040.
Okay.
That's your.
I'll put that together in the resolution. We can have that discussion on 22nd.
Okay, anybody else have anything to say? Not, let's adjourn.
Thank you.